The neural whips hung motionless in the air, their energy fields crackling. Uselessly 3 feet above 6 cowering cubs, 12 instructors stood frozen in identical poses of interrupted violence, their weapons refusing to complete their ceremonial arc of punishment. What did you do? Head instructor Korvax demanded, his scaled face contorted with disbelief as he stared at the small human janitor who had somehow caused this impossible malfunction. Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 99.5% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. Emma looked up from her mop bucket, genuinely confused by the question. I said no, you were about to hit kids. She gestured at the cubs huddled on the training mat. So I said no, you said no. Instructor Zilax repeated the words as if they were in an alien language. His neural whip sparked and died in his grip, the crimson energy field dissolving into harmless static. And the weapons just stopped. Well, yeah, Emma resumed mopping, apparently unaware that she had just violated fundamental laws of physics and 8 centuries of military tradition. Nobody should be hitting kids ever. What's complicated about that? The facility's emergency clones began wailing as the Academy's AI registered what it classified as a Category 7 reality breach. In 300 years of operation, nothing had ever merited a Category 7 classification. The scale hadn't been designed to go that high. This is impossible, Dr. Zeiler announced as he materialized via emergency transport, his scanners already sweeping the training chamber. Neural whips are quantum locked to their wielders' nervous system. They cannot simply cease to function because someone objects to their use. Emma paused to study the tall insectoid figure with mild interest. Are you some kind of doctor? Because these kids look pretty scared. Maybe we should worry about that instead of your broken equipment. Broken equipment. Zyar's compound eyes flickered with offense. These are precision instruments capable of delivering calculated neural stimulation designed to hit kids. Emma interrupted. Right, still not happening. The 6 Velari cubs had begun to lift their heads, their large amber eyes darting between the frozen instructors and the small human who had somehow made the scary thing stop working. The largest cub, barely reaching Emma's knee, took a tentative step toward her. Get back in formation, Korvac barked, but his voice carried none of its usual authority. The cubs ignored him completely, drawn to Emma like metal to a magnet. Technical malfunction across all primary systems. Instructor Vex, though, reported, his voice tight with disbelief. Initiating backup protocols. 12 backup whips emerged from wall compartments with mechanical precision, their energy fields humming to life, fresh weapons untouched by whatever had affected the primary systems. Surely these would function normally. Emma glanced up as the new weapons activated. Oh, seriously, we're doing this again. The backup weapons died instantly. Commander Arhal materialized in the chamber, his forearms spread in a gesture of absolute authority. What is the status of this situation? Why are discipline protocols suspended? Sir Korvax began, then stopped. How did you explain that a human janitor had somehow broken the fundamental operation of military equipment by expressing disagreement? The human appears to be generating some kind of interference field, Dr. Zeiler reported his scanners producing readings. That shouldn't exist. Every neural interface weapon within a 50 m radius has ceased to function. Interference field. Emma looked genuinely puzzled. I'm just mopping and telling you not to hit kids. That's not interference. That's basic human decency. Rahul's primary arms gestured for immediate action while his secondary arms reached for communication devices. Human, you will remove yourself from this training area immediately. These cubs require disciplinary correction for breaking formation during combat exercises. What exactly did they do wrong? Emma asked, settling cross-legged on the floor. The cubs immediately moved closer. Their natural predator instincts somehow completely suppressed in her presence. They ceased combat operations to assist a fallen teammate, Zilax explained. Through gritted teeth, cooperation is weakness, individual dominance, and aggression are essential for proper warrior development. Emma stared at him. And you were going to hurt them for helping each other. The punishment ritual is necessary, Korvax insisted, though doubt was creeping into his voice. Velari are apex predators. They must learn to prioritize victory over sentiment. They're babies, Emma said. Flatly, one of the smaller cubs had brushed against her leg and begun to purr, a response that should have been impossible for a species bred for solitary hunting. Look at them, really. Look, against every regulation and centuries of protocol, the instructors found themselves actually observing the cubs as individuals rather than training subjects. The smallest couldn't be more than 6 months old, its scales still soft and pale, another bore scars suggesting it had already experienced violence. All of them were trembling with genuine fear. This behavior is unprecedented, Dr. Zara announced as she arrived with the emergency response team. Velari cubs do not form emotional attachments to non-pack members. They certainly do not display submissive postures toward unfamiliar species, maybe because nobody ever tried being nice to them before, Emma suggested, gently patting the head of the cub that had approached her. Back home, when kids help each other up after someone falls, we call that being good kids. We don't punish them for it. The facility's AI delivered its analysis in a voice strained with digital confusion. Unable to classify phenomenon, human subject appears to be generating localized alterations to quantum field interactions. All weapon systems within affected area report simultaneous cascade failures. Recommend immediate evacuation and containment protocols. Nobody's evacuating anything, Emma said firmly, and somehow everyone present knew that any attempt to remove her would fail just as completely as the neural whips had. These kids need someone to actually take care of them. Rael attempted to activate his emergency communicator. The device remains silent and dark. This is beyond unprecedented. Weapons do not cease to function simply because of being objects to their intended use. Maybe they should, Emma replied, watching as the cubs began to engage in gentle play behavior around. Sorry. I mean, if your weapons won't work. When someone says not to hurt kids, that sounds like the universe trying to tell you something. The largest cub brought Emma a training ball, apparently wanting her to throw it. The gesture was completely outside normal Velari behavioral parameters. They were solitary hunters who competed rather than cooperated. Emma threw the ball Across the chamber, and all 6 cubs raced after it in a chaotic tangle of scales and pure joy, no dominance, displays, no territorial aggression. Just children being children, 800 years of established military psychology. Korvax whispered, watching the unprecedented display. Generational studies, evolutionary, behavioral analysis. Maybe you've been wrong for 800 years, Emma suggested cheerfully, catching the ball as the cubs brought it back in a cooperative effort that should have been genetically impossible. Ever think of that across the academy? Similar reports were flooding in from other training chambers, humans throughout the facility, custodial staff, food service workers, maintenance technicians were somehow interfering with discipline protocols simply by being present when punishment was administered, neural whips, shock prods, and isolation. Chambers were failing galaxy-wide, and in every case, the young beings under human protection were displaying unprecedented levels of cooperation, learning, and happiness. There we go, Emma said, throwing the ball again as the cubs tumbled joyfully after it. Much better than hitting people with energy sticks, don't you think? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Galactic Military Academy represented, while 6 impossible cubs played games that their species wasn't supposed to be capable of enjoying. Within minutes, the training chamber had transformed into something that violated every principle of military education. Theory. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by 6 Velari cubs who should have been establishing dominance hierarchies through ritualized combat. Instead, they were taking turns bringing her different training objects, their tails wagging in a display of contentment that their instructors had never witnessed. This cannot continue, Instructor Zilax muttered, though he made no move to intervene. Every time he reached for alternative discipline equipment, the devices would flicker and die before his claws could activate them. Velari military doctrine requires what exactly? Emma interrupted, gently untangling 2 cubs who had gotten their training harnesses twisted together while playing, making kids miserable. Because from where I'm sitting, these guys seem pretty smart. Maybe try teaching them something useful. Instead of hitting them, Dr. Zyler's scanners were producing readings that defied classification. The cubs are exhibiting behavioral patterns completely outside their species. Documented psychological profile, cooperative play, protective clustering around a non-pack member, voluntary submission to a smaller being. These responses shouldn't be possible. Why not? Emma asked, watching with delight as the smallest cub attempted to demonstrate a proper pouncing technique for her benefit. They're kids. Kids like to play and learn and feel safe. Maybe the problem isn't them, maybe it's your expectations. Commander R. High had been attempting to contact High Command for the past 10 minutes, but every communication device in the chamber remained stubbornly non-functional. The implications of this incident extend far beyond a single training session. If discipline protocols can be disrupted by human presence, our entire military education system is compromised. Good, Emma said cheerfully, helping the smallest cub practice its pounce by pretending to be startled each time. Your system sounds terrible. These kids are adorable. Why would you want to make them afraid? Because fear breeds respect, Korvax insisted, though his Conviction was wavering as he watched. The cubs demonstrate problem-solving, skills that surpassed anything they'd shown during traditional training. Respect creates discipline, discipline forges warriors, that's backwards thinking, Emma replied, producing a package of crackers from her maintenance kit. The cubs immediately perked up with interest, but rather than fighting over the food, they formed an orderly line. Fear makes kids shut down. You want them to learn, you make them feel safe first. Dr. Zara was documenting everything with growing amazement. The cubs are voluntarily organizing themselves. Without any dominance displays, they're sharing resources, taking turns even, showing consideration for the smallest member of their group. This level of cooperative behavior typically requires years of specialized training or 5 minutes of not threatening to hurt them. Emma observed, breaking crackers into equal portions for each cub. Funny how that works, the feeding process revealed even more impossible behaviors. Velari cubs were supposed to be aggressive about food, establishing hierarchy through competitive eating. Instead, they waited patiently for their portions, and when one cub dropped its cracker, 2 others immediately offered to share theirs. This violates fundamental evolutionary psychology, Vexthal said weakly. Predator species compete for resources. It's basic survival programming. Maybe survival programming changes when survival isn't threatened, Emma suggested. These kids know they're safe now. They don't need to fight each other for food or attention. Instructor Jotaro arrived with reinforcements, carrying a portable neural discipline array that represented the Academy's most advanced punishment technology. This unit is completely isolated from the Academy's main systems. Whatever interference the human is generating shouldn't affect the device. Died the moment it entered the chamber. Let me guess, Emma said without looking up from the cubs, who had begun showing her their individual preferred scratching spots. More stuff designed to hurt kids. Advanced behavioral modification technology, Jotaro corrected, staring at his useless equipment designed to encourage proper responses through carefully calibrated negative reinforcement. Still just hitting kids with extra steps, Emma replied, and apparently your equipment agrees with me. The Academy's AI delivered another update, its voice now edged with something approaching panic phenomenon spreading to adjacent training areas. Human maintenance staff throughout the facility are generating similar interference patterns, all disciplinary protocols experiencing cascade failures. Recommend immediate consultation with Galactic Command. What's happening in the other areas? Rahel demanded, kitchen staff refusing to allow food rationing punishment. Custodial workers interrupting sleep deprivation protocols. Repair technicians somehow preventing isolation. Chamber activation. In every case, young beings are displaying unprecedented positive behavior modifications. Emma looked up with interest. Other people are doing this too. That's great. Nobody likes seeing kids get hurt. The human appears to be unaware of her effect on quantum field mechanics. Dr. Zeiler reported her interference with neural weapon systems seems to be unconscious and instinctive. It's not interference, Emma protested. It's basic human decency. When you see someone about to hurt a kid, you stop them. That's not quantum whatever. That's just being a decent person. Korvax was studying the cubs with growing confusion. In the past hour, they had demonstrated advanced problem-solving, cooperative behavior, and learning rates that exceeded anything achieved through traditional methods. How are they advancing so rapidly? Without proper motivation, what do you mean proper motivation? Emma asked. Fear of punishment, desire to avoid pain, competition for resources and status. The fundamental drives that create excellence. Emma stared at him. You think fear makes kids learn better? It's been proven effective for centuries. Zilax interjected, though he sounded less certain than before. Has it though? Emma gestured to the cubs, who were now attempting to build a tower out of training blocks, while the smallest one offered helpful suggestions. Because these guys seem to be learning just fine, without anyone threatening them. Dr. Zira's readings were becoming increasingly impossible to explain. The cubs are exhibiting cognitive development rates approximately 300% above baseline. Their social cooperation index has increased by factors that shouldn't be mathematically possible. It's almost like they're actually smart when they're not scared, Emma observed. Weird how that works. Commander Real finally managed to establish contact with High Command using an ancient mechanical communicator that predated neural interface technology. Sir, we have a situation that requires immediate consultation. Human presence is somehow negating all disciplinary capabilities. The response crackled through static. Explain the nature of this interference. The humans appear to object to standard punishment protocols, Rahil reported. Reluctantly, their presence causes complete system failures in neural interface weapons and the training subjects. Raya looked at the cubs, who were now engaged in what could only be described as collaborative engineering, as they worked together to solve increasingly complex puzzles that Emma had improvised from training equipment. They're learning at unprecedented rates. Sir, static filled the communication for several long moments before High Command responded. Are you telling me that human objection to discipline is somehow improving training effectiveness? That appears to be the case, sir. Emma had overheard the conversation and looked up with a grin. You guys want to see something really cool? She stood up and walked to the tactical training console that the cubs had been ignoring all morning. Hey kids, want to learn how this works? The cubs immediately abandoned their block tower and gathered around the console with eager attention. Emma began explaining the display patterns in simple terms, and within minutes the young Velari were operating systems that typically required weeks of training to master. Impossible. Korvax breathed. That equipment is designed for advanced students. They're smart kids, Emma said proudly, watching as the cubs collaboratively solved navigation problems that challenged veteran officers. They just needed someone to explain it nicely instead of threatening to hurt them if they got it wrong. The implications were staggering. If human presence could somehow eliminate the need for fear-based training while dramatically improving learning outcomes, everything the Galactic Military Academy believed about education was wrong, and across the galaxy, similar incidents were being reported from every facility where humans and young beings intersected. Sir, Rahil said into his communicator, watching 6 cubs effortlessly master tactical scenarios that had stumped previous classes. I think we need to reconsider our entire approach to military education. The emergency Council session had been running for 6 hours and nobody understood what they were witnessing. High Admiral K. Thrawn stood before a wall of displays showing feed from 17 different galactic military academy facilities, each one documenting the same impossible phenomenon: humans somehow neutralizing discipline protocols while young beings achieved unprecedented learning breakthroughs. "Explain to me again," the Admiral said slowly, "how a janitor caused the complete failure of quantum-locked neural interface technology by expressing disagreement." Dr. Zeiler's compound eyes flickered nervously as he consulted his readings. For the 100th time, the human designated Emma appears to generate a localized field that disrupts neural interface connections when she stated her objection to the punishment protocol. Every weapon within 50 m became completely non-functional. And this is happening galaxy-wide. Yes, sir. Food service personnel preventing nutritional restriction, punishments, maintenance workers disrupting isolation protocols, security guards somehow making shock restraints inoperable. In every case the pattern is identical. Humans observe potential harm to young beings, express objection, and our equipment simply stops working. Fleet Commander Varth leaned forward in his hover chair. "What you're describing violates fundamental physics. Consciousness cannot directly manipulate quantum field interactions without specialized interface technology. Unless," Dr. Zira interjected hesitantly, "consciousness was never separate from quantum fields in the first place. What if human neural patterns naturally resonate with the frequencies we use for weapon control? That's impossible." Instructor Zilax protested from his position at the conference table. "Billions of species have interacted with neural interface technology. None have ever displayed this capability. None have ever tried to protect children from it." Emma's voice came through the communication feed from the academy training chamber. "Maybe that's the difference." The council members turned to stare at the display showing Emma still surrounded by the 6 Velari cubs, who had now advanced to solving tactical problems that challenged senior officers. She was teaching them collaborative strategy through what appeared to be an elaborate game involving colored blocks and cheerful commentary. "Human Emma," Admiral Catherine addressed the screen directly, "you claim this effect is simply protective instinct, I guess." Emma shrugged while helping the smallest cub reach a high block. "All I know is you were about to hurt kids and..." Something inside me said, "Absolutely not." The rest just kind of happened. Dr. Zeiler studied his readings again. The quantum resonance patterns suggest an evolutionary adaptation. Human neural structures may have developed to naturally interfere with systems designed to cause harm to vulnerable young. An evolutionary adaptation to disrupting advanced alien technology that didn't exist when humans evolved. Vark's voice dripped skepticism. "An evolutionary adaptation to protecting children," Emma corrected from the screen. "Your technology just happens to trigger the same response we'd have to any threat against kids." Instructor Korvax had been silent throughout most of the session, but now he cleared his throat. "Admirals, with respect, there's something else we need to address. The learning acceleration in the Cubs isn't just unprecedented, it's revolutionary." "Explain." "In the 8 hours since the human intervention began, these 6 Cubs have mastered concepts that typically require 3 months of intensive training there, solving complex tactical scenarios, demonstrating advanced problem-solving skills and showing innovative thinking that we've never observed in students of any age. Admiral Cron studied the tactical display where the Cubs were cheerfully rearranging fleet formations to optimize both offense and defense simultaneously. How is this possible? They're not afraid, Emma said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. When kids aren't scared of making mistakes, they actually try harder. When they know they're safe, they can focus on learning instead of survival. Dr. Zara's reading spiked. The Cubs are exhibiting neuroplasticity rates 300% above baseline. Their cognitive development has accelerated to levels we didn't know were biologically possible, and this is consistent across all affected facilities. Yes, sir, every location where humans have interfered with discipline protocols is reporting similar results. Young beings are advancing at rates that challenge our understanding of educational psychology. Fleet Commander Vark pulled up Academy performance statistics spanning the last 2 centuries. These results suggest that our entire educational methodology has been counterproductive. That's putting it mildly, Emma muttered, watching as the Cubs collaborated to design a defensive formation that incorporated innovations none of the instructors had considered. You've been scaring kids for 800 years and wondering why they're not learning as well as they could. Instructor Vexthal, who had remained silent during most of the discussion, finally spoke up. If these learning improvements are genuine and reproducible, we may need to completely restructure our training protocols. Restructure, Admiral Cathran repeated, based on the interference of maintenance personnel, based on results that exceed our best case projections by several 100%, Korvax corrected. Sir, I've been training Cubs for 40 years. I've never seen anything like what these 6 have accomplished today. The display showing Emma's training chamber updated to show the Cubs had somehow reprogrammed their tactical simulator to include variables that original designers hadn't considered. They were testing scenarios that combined multiple species' strategic advantages while compensating for their individual weaknesses. How did they learn to do that? Dr. Zeiler asked in amazement. I told them they could experiment, Emma replied. Kids love figuring out how things work when you let them play with stuff instead of punishing them for touching it. Admiral Kethen was beginning to understand the scope of what they were witnessing. Dr. Zira, I want immediate analysis of educational outcomes from every facility experiencing human interference already compiled. Sir. Zara's display showed statistics that painted a picture of educational revolution. Average learning rates up 400%. Problem-solving innovation increased by factors we can't accurately measure. Cooperative behavior improvements that exceed our most optimistic projections. And disciplinary issues essentially eliminated. Sir, when young beings feel safe and engaged, disruptive behavior drops to near zero. Instructor Jitaro, who had been reviewing footage from multiple facilities, looked up with confusion. Sir, the humans aren't even trying to teach. They're just being nice to the Cubs, talking to them like they matter, treating them as individuals rather than training subjects. Maybe that's the point, Emma suggested, absently scratching behind the ears of a Cub who had successfully calculated hyperspace navigation trajectories that should have been beyond its developmental capacity. Kids aren't training subjects, they're people. Little people who deserve respect and kindness and the chance to learn without being afraid. Fleet Commander Verk was studying reports from the Academy's historical archives. These results indicate that our fear-based training methods have been actively willing 24, hindering development for centuries. We may have been creating precisely the opposite outcomes we intended. You think? Emma's voice carried gentle sarcasm. Scared kids don't learn well. Happy kids do. This isn't quantum physics, it's basic child psychology. Dr. Zeiler was frantically recalculating his psychological models. If these patterns hold true across all species, we're looking at the potential for revolutionary advances in education, military training, and psychological development. What are you suggesting? Admiral Catherine asked. I'm suggesting that humans may have accidentally solved problems we've been creating for ourselves for millennia. Their instinctive approach to child protection and education appears to optimize learning in ways our scientific methods never achieved. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 800 years of military tradition, centuries of educational psychology and fundamental assumptions about learning and discipline, all potentially invalidated by human janitors and kitchen staff who simply couldn't stand to see children being hurt. There's something else, Korvax added quietly. The cubs are asking questions we've never heard before, not just tactical questions but ethical ones. They want to know why certain strategies work, what the consequences might be for different species, how to minimize casualties while achieving objectives. Critical thinking skills, Emma noted approvingly. Kids are naturally curious about right and wrong when they're not too scared to ask questions. Dr. Zara's scanners were detecting something new. Admiral, I'm registering changes in the cub's neural development patterns. They're forming cognitive pathways that our models suggest should be impossible at their developmental stage. What kind of pathways? Enhanced empathy processing, advanced ethical reasoning, improved spatial and temporal analysis. They're not just learning faster, they're able learning in ways that suggest fundamentally superior cognitive architecture. Admiral Kethen watched as the cubs on the display paused their tactical exercises to comfort one of their number who had become frustrated with a particularly complex problem. Instead of dominating or excluding the struggling cub, they worked together to break the problem into manageable pieces and celebrated when their teammates succeeded. This cooperation, he said slowly, it's completely outside Velari behavioral norms. It's completely outside everyone's behavioral norms. Instructor Vexel observed, we're seeing collaboration between species that have been natural enemies for thousands of years. The displays updated to show cubs from multiple species working together on joint projects throughout the Academy. Traditional territorial and hierarchical barriers seem to have simply evaporated in the presence of humans who treated them all as equally valuable young beings deserving of care and respect. The implications extend far beyond military training. Fleet Commander Vardik realized if human presence can generate this level of interspecies cooperation in educational settings, it could revolutionize diplomatic relations. Admiral Kethron Finished, social integration, conflict resolution. The applications are unlimited. Emma looked up from the tactical display where the Cubs had just designed a peacekeeping protocol that incorporated protective strategies for all known species. You guys are making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Just be nice to kids, treat them like they matter, keep them safe and let them learn. It's not rocket science. Actually, Dr. Exiller said quietly, it may be more revolutionary than rocket science. The emergency council session was far from over, but one thing had become abundantly clear: human instincts about child protection and education were producing results that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about learning, cooperation, and development. And in training chambers across 17 worlds, human maintenance staff were accidentally reshaping the future of galactic civilization by doing nothing more complicated than refusing to let anyone hurt children. Sir, Commander Rel's voice came through the communication array. What are our orders regarding continued human presence in training facilities? Admiral Kethan looked at the displays showing unprecedented learning outcomes, revolutionary cooperation between species, and young beings developing cognitive capabilities that exceeded all previous expectations. Stand down all disciplinary protocols until further notice, he ordered, and someone get me every human working in education across the galaxy. We need to understand how they've been solving problems we didn't even know we had. Emma's cheerful voice drifted through the speakers as she helped the Cubs design what appeared to be a diplomatic framework for resolving interspecies conflicts through collaborative problem solving rather than dominance assertions. Finally, she said with obvious relief, now we can focus on actually helping these kids instead of arguing about it. The revolution in galactic education had begun with a single word from a janitor who simply couldn't stand to see children being hurt, and it was going to change everything. Dr. Zira stood before the largest assembly of educational experts in galactic history, her hands trembling as she prepared to deliver findings that would overturn 8 centuries of established doctrine. Representatives from every major species packed the Grand Council chamber, their attention focused on the impossible data streaming across the presentation displays. The results are conclusive, she began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. Human intervention in educational protocols has produced learning outcomes that exceed our most optimistic projections by factors we initially thought were measurement errors. Fleet Admiral Cathan gestured for specifics. Quantify the improvements, Doctor. Average learning rates increased by 400%. Problem-solving innovation improved by measures we lack adequate scales to represent interspecies cooperation. Rates achieved theoretical maximums that our models suggested were impossible. And, most significantly, disciplinary issues have been reduced by 98% across all affected facilities. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Council member Drathon of the Hegemony leaned forward. You're claiming that human maintenance workers have revolutionized education by what? Exactly, by treating young beings with kindness and refusing to allow them to be harmed. Zara replied simply, the methodology appears to be instinctive human behavior rather than any sophisticated technique. Emma's voice crackled through the communication feed. From the academy, I keep telling you, guys, it's not complicated, don't hit. Kids, make them feel safe and let them learn by trying stuff, that's literally it. On the main display, the 6 Velari cubs were engaged in what could only be described as revolutionary tactical innovation. They had somehow designed a conflict resolution protocol that incorporated psychological, environmental, and logistical factors in ways that challenged fundamental military theory. How is this level of advancement possible? Demanded General Zier, his mandibles clicking with agitation. These cubs have been training for less than 12 standard hours under human influence. Instructor Korvax participating via holographic projection from the academy cleared his throat. Nervously, General, with respect, they've been learning for 12 hours. This is the first time they've been allowed to learn without fear of punishment for mistakes. Explain the distinction. Traditional training focuses on avoiding errors. Through fear of consequences, the cubs spent most of their cognitive energy calculating how to avoid punishment, rather than engaging with the actual learning material. Remove the fear and they can dedicate their full mental capacity to understanding and innovation. Dr. Zier added his analysis from the academy feed. The cubs' neuroplasticity reading suggests they're operating at optimal cognitive efficiency for the first time in their lives. Fear-based learning actually creates physiological barriers to memory formation and creative thinking. Emma appeared on screen surrounded by the cubs, who were now teaching each other advanced concepts through collaborative games they had invented. Back home, we learned this stuff in kindergarten. Scared kids can't learn. Happy kids learn everything you put in front of them and then some. Council member Velaris of the Trade Federation stood up. Are you suggesting that our entire educational system has been counterproductive for centuries? Not counterproductive, Emma corrected gently while helping the smallest cub explain its solution to a complex resource allocation problem. Just backwards. You've been trying to teach through fear when you should have been teaching through trust. The implications were staggering. Every major civilization in the galaxy had based their educational systems on variations of discipline through consequences, militaries, technical institutes, leadership, training programs, all of them built on the fundamental assumption that fear of punishment motivated excellence. Dr. Zara displayed the comparative data analysis of historical performance. Record suggests that learning efficiency has been artificially suppressed for millennia. If we extrapolate from current human influenced results, our educational potential may have been operating at less than 20% capacity. 20%, Admiral Cathan repeated in disbelief. The cubs are demonstrating capabilities that our developmental models suggested were impossible until advanced maturity. They're solving problems, creating innovations, and showing leadership skills that we previously thought required decades of training to achieve. Instructor Vexthal joined the conversation from another academy facility. We're seeing similar results across all species. Tari hatchlings are developing communication skills that typically emerge only adults. Zephyrian larvae are showing spatial reasoning that surpasses our senior engineers. The pattern is consistent everywhere humans have intervened, and the mechanism for this improvement asked Research Director Northcliffe. Safety, Emma said simply, as one of the Cubs proudly showed her a defensive strategy that elegantly protected civilian populations while maintaining tactical advantage. When kids know they're safe, when they trust the adults around them, when they're not afraid of making mistakes, they learn like crazy. They try things, they experiment, they ask questions, they help each other. The Cubs on screen were doing exactly that, engaged in collaborative problem solving that incorporated insights from multiple disciplines. What was remarkable wasn't just their individual advancement, but their ability to work together across species lines that had historically been insurmountable. The cooperation aspect may be even more significant than the learning acceleration, Dr. Zira noted. We're observing unprecedented inter-species collaboration. Traditional territorial and dominance behaviors have been completely superseded by cooperative instincts. Council member Drathon studied the displays showing young beings from 12 different species working together on joint projects throughout the academy. This cooperation, is it sustainable or merely a temporary response to novel circumstances? Instructor Korvax consulted his observations. It appears to be self-reinforcing. The Cubs are developing social bonds that cross species lines. They're creating inclusive hierarchies based on complementary strengths rather than competitive dominance, and most importantly, they're teaching these collaborative behaviors to newly arrived Cubs. They're creating their own culture, Emma observed proudly, watching as the Cubs welcomed a nervous newcomer and immediately began helping it understand the collaborative approach to learning, a culture based on helping each other instead of competing against each other. Fleet Commander Vark was reviewing tactical assessments of the Cubs' innovations. Some of these strategic designs surpass the work of our senior military analysts. How is such advancement possible in beings barely past infancy? Because infancy might be when most real learning happens, Emma suggested. Maybe you've been wasting the most important developmental period by focusing on discipline instead of discovery. Dr. Zeiler's reading supported this hypothesis. Neuroplasticity is highest during early development. If fear responses are suppressing this natural learning capacity, we may have been systematically preventing optimal cognitive development for generations. The implications extended far beyond education. If human methods could revolutionize learning and cooperation to this degree, what did it mean for military effectiveness, scientific research, diplomatic relations, and social development across the galaxy? Dr. Zira, Admiral Kathan said slowly, what are your recommendations for implementing these findings? Complete restructuring of educational protocols across all institutions, she replied. Without hesitation, elimination of punishment-based motivation systems, integration of human advisors into all training programs, fundamental retraining of educational personnel in protective rather than disciplinary approaches. The scale of such changes would be unprecedented. Council member Velsaris pointed out, we're talking about dismantling educational systems that have existed for millennia. We're talking about fixing education systems that have been broken for millennia, Emma corrected cheerfully as the Cubs demonstrated a conflict resolution technique that successfully mediated a resource dispute between 3 different species. Look, you guys can make this as complicated as you want, but the answer is really simple. Treat kids like they matter, keep them safe, and let them learn by doing. Everything else is just details. Instructor Jotaro reported from yet another facility. We're implementing human-advised protocols in additional training centers. Initial results confirm the pattern. Dramatic improvements in learning, cooperation, and innovation when fear-based methods are eliminated. What about discipline? General Zeter demanded. How do you maintain order without consequences for misbehavior? Emma laughed, a sound that somehow carried warmth even through the communication system. You don't need to maintain order when kids are engaged and happy. Watch these guys. Have you seen any misbehavior? The displays showed cubs throughout the academy engaged in productive activities, helping each other, solving problems, and learning at unprecedented rates. There was no chaos, no disruption, no need for discipline. Just young beings thriving in an environment of safety and trust. The cubs are self-regulating, Instructor Korvax observed. When they feel secure and valued, they naturally want to contribute and cooperate. Misbehavior appears to be primarily a response to stress and fear rather than inherent defiance. Dr. Zira compiled the final analysis. Human intervention has demonstrated that our fundamental assumptions about education, motivation, and development were incorrect. Young beings learn optimally through encouragement rather than intimidation, cooperation rather than competition, and trust rather than fear. And the long-term implications? Admiral Cathran asked. Revolutionary advancement in every field that depends on education, Zara replied. Military effectiveness, scientific innovation, diplomatic cooperation, social development, all of these could be dramatically enhanced if we adopt human-influenced educational methods. Emma's voice carried the simple wisdom that was reshaping galactic civilization. Kids are amazing when you give them the chance to be amazing. That's not a human thing, that's just a kid thing. You guys have been making it way too complicated on screens. Throughout the chamber, young beings of multiple species were solving problems, creating innovations, and building relationships that challenged every assumption about education and development. The evidence was undeniable. Human instincts about child protection and learning had accidentally revealed the key to unlocking potential that had been suppressed for centuries. The revolution in galactic education was no longer a question of whether to implement changes, but how quickly they could transform an entire civilization's approach to nurturing young minds. And it all started with a janitor who simply said no when someone tried to hurt children. 6 months later, Emma clocked out of her shift at what was now called the Galactic Cooperative Learning Institute, formerly known as the Military Academy. The neural whips had been melted down and turned into playground equipment, which the cubs thought was hilarious. Same time tomorrow? Asked Instructor Korvax, now called Learning Facilitator Korvax, as he watched the latest group of cubs demonstrate a breakthrough in quantum mechanics that had stumped researchers for decades. Yep, Emma said cheerfully, hanging up her maintenance uniform. Though I still think you guys are overthinking this whole revolutionary education transformation thing. It's just not hitting kids. The 6 original Velari cubs had become The Academy's first peer teaching specialist helping new arrivals adapt to the collaborative learning environment. They had also somehow invented 3 new branches of mathematics and a diplomatic protocol that had ended a 40-year border dispute between the hegemony and the trade federation. Emma called the smallest cub, now nearly as tall as her. We finished designing the new playground for the crystalline younglings want to see. She grinned and followed them to the design console, where they had created an interactive environment that would allow silicon-based life forms to learn through structured play. The fact that this required solving several supposedly impossible engineering challenges hadn't slowed them down at all. This is gorgeous, Emma said, studying their work. The harmonic resonance chambers will help them develop communication skills while the puzzle matrices build problem-solving abilities. You guys are amazing. Admiral Keithan materialized via hologram, no longer intimidating in his modified uniform that featured bright patches contributed by various cubs over the months. Emma, the quarterly reports are ready for your review. I keep telling you I'm just the janitor. Emma laughed, though she accepted the data pad anyway. The numbers were staggering. Learning rates up 800% across all galactic educational institutions. Interspecies conflicts down 90%. And innovation breakthroughs occurring at rates that had forced economists to create new measurement categories. Zephyrian Science Collective has requested human advisors for their youth development programs. The Admiral continued. Apparently their larvae designed a faster-than-light communication system after only 3 weeks in a fear-free learning environment. That's great, Emma said. Kids love figuring out how to talk to each other. Make sure whoever goes understands that the secret is just listening to what they're excited about and helping them explore it safely. Dr. Zara appeared on the communication feed from the research station. Emma, we've completed the Array F Head's analysis of educational outcomes across 847 worlds. The pattern is consistent everywhere. Human-influenced learning environments produce results that exceed our wildest projections because happy kids learn better than scared kids, Emma replied patiently. How many times do I have to say it? The Galactic Council is drafting the Universal Declaration of Young Being Rights. Zara continued. They want to name it after you. Emma looked horrified. Please don't. Just call it the Don't Hit Kids Declaration or something simple like that. The cubs giggled, a sound that still amazed their former instructors who had never heard their species express joy before Emma arrived. They had grown into confident young beings who solved problems through collaboration, asked questions without fear, and naturally included newcomers in their learning communities. The most remarkable change isn't in the education system, observed instructor Vex Thur, watching as cubs from 12 different species work together on a project to design better life support systems for mixed environment stations. It's in the kids themselves. They're becoming something we've never seen before. They're becoming what they always could have been, Emma corrected, gathering her things to head home. We just stopped getting in their way. As she walked toward the transport, the cubs called out their goodbyes in a dozen languages, already planning tomorrow's collaborative adventures. Behind her, the Academy hummed with the sound of young beings learning, creating, and thriving in an environment built on safety, trust, and the revolutionary idea that children deserve to be treated with kindness. The neural whips were silent forever, their playground. Equipment replacements echoing with laughter instead of fear. See you tomorrow, kids, Emma called back, heading home with the satisfaction of another day spent doing what humans had always done best, protecting the young and giving them room to grow. Revolution, it turned out, was just another word for treating people the way they deserve to be treated.